$5,400. That was the total on the receipt, trembling in Lydia's hand. In the dim, amber light of Manhattan's most exclusive private dining room, the man sitting before her, a titan of industry whose net worth rivaled the GDP of small countries, didn't just decline his card. He laughed. He leaned back in his Italian leather chair, picked his teeth with a gold toothpick, and declared the service insufficient to warrant payment. He thought he was untouchable. He thought Lydia was just another invisible waitress he could crush for sport. He didn't know that before she tied on that apron, she had memorized the one document he feared most: his own foundation's charter. Tonight, the bill would be paid, one way or another. The air inside the onyx room didn't smell like food. It smelled of old money, mahogany polish, and the faint, metallic tang of anxiety. Located in the basement of a nondescript building on Fifth Avenue, just blocks away from the sensory overload of Times Square, this was where the real power of New York City came to dine. It was a place where menu prices were absent, because if you had to ask, you were already trespassing. Lydia smoothed the front of her charcoal waistcoat, checking her reflection in the darkened glass of the wine cellar door. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it made her temples throb, a dull ache that had become her constant companion over the last 6 months. She checked her watch, a battered Timex that looked almost offensive against the crisp white tablecloths. 8:15 p.m. They were late. "Table 4 is yours tonight, Lydia," Giles, the floor manager, whispered as he glided past her. Giles was a man who sweated ice water. Nothing rattled him, usually, but tonight his upper lip glistened. "The Calloway party. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact for longer than 3 seconds. And for the love of God, do not let his water glass drop below the half-full mark." Lydia nodded, her face a mask of professional indifference. "Understood, Giles." "He's in a mood," Giles added, stopping to adjust a perfectly straight fork. "The merger with the Omnicorp group stalled this morning. He's looking for a punching bag. Don't let it be you." Lydia watched Giles retreat to the safety of the kitchen. She knew exactly who Paxton Calloway was. Everyone did. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was an institution. He was the chairman of Calloway Global, a board member of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the primary donor to half the hospitals in the tri-state area. He was also, according to the tabloids and the hushed whispers of the service industry underground, a tyrant who treated service staff like furniture that could be discarded if it squeaked. At 8:23 p.m., the heavy oak doors swung open. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Conversations at other tables, CEOs, senators, Broadway producers, hushed perceptibly. Paxton Calloway entered first. He was a man in his late 50s, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than Lydia's entire college tuition debt. He had silver hair swept back with aggressive precision and eyes the color of a winter sea. Trailing him were 3 others. To his left was Trent, a younger man in a velvet blazer who looked like he spent his days losing money on crypto and his nights spending his father's trust fund. To his right was a woman named Veronica, severe and beautiful, scrolling through a tablet as she walked. Bringing up the rear was a man Lydia didn't recognize, heavy-set, silent, carrying a briefcase that looked handcuffed to his wrist. "The corner!" Paxton barked, not looking at the host. He pointed a manicured finger toward the secluded booth Lydia had prepped for 2 hours. "Right this way, Mr. Calloway," the host stammered. Lydia took her position by the table, hands clasped behind her back, invisible until summoned. She watched them settle. Paxton didn't sit. He descended onto the banquette like a king taking a throne. "Scotch," Paxton said to the air. "The Macallan 52. Neat. And if the ice in the water is clouded, send it back." "Immediately, sir," Lydia said, her voice steady. She moved with the efficiency of a machine. The Macallan 52 was kept in a locked cabinet. One shot cost $600. As she poured the amber liquid, she could feel Paxton's gaze on her hands. He was watching for a tremble. He was waiting for a drop to spill. She poured perfectly, stopping exactly when the liquid kissed the crystal line of the glass. She placed it before him. He didn't say thank you. He held the glass up to the light, inspecting it for fingerprints. "The menu, sir?" Lydia asked. "We don't need menus," Trent interrupted, laughing too loudly. "Paxton, are we doing the Wagyu?" Paxton took a sip of the scotch, grimaced slightly, as if the liquid had personally insulted him, and slammed the glass down. "We are celebrating, despite the incompetence of my legal team. We will have the A5 Kobe beef flown in this morning, the entire tenderloin, and the beluga caviar, the kilogram tin." Lydia's internal calculator clicked. The kilogram tin of beluga alone was $12,000. This wasn't a meal. It was a display of dominance. "Excellent choice," Lydia said. "And for the lady?" "She'll have what I'm having," Paxton said, cutting Veronica off before she could look up from her tablet. "And bring a bottle of the 82 Waitress. Open it at the table. I want to see the cork." "Of course." As Lydia turned to leave, she heard Paxton's voice drop to a low, dangerous rumble. "The audacity of the SEC to audit the charitable arm. They have no idea who they are dealing with. The foundation is bulletproof." Lydia froze for a fraction of a second. The foundation. The Callaway Philanthropic Trust. "They're looking for leaks, Paxton." The silent man with the briefcase finally spoke. His voice was like gravel. "Article 4 compliance." "Article 4 is a suggestion for people like us, not a rule." Paxton scoffed. "Let them dig. I wrote the bylaws. I can rewrite them." Lydia walked into the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew Article 4. She knew it intimately. 4 years ago, before the debt, before the sick mother, before she was waiting tables to pay for a law degree she had to abandon, Lydia had been an intern at the very law firm that drafted the Callaway Trust's original charter. She had spent 3 months proofreading those bylaws. She knew the clauses better than she knew the wine list. "Order in," Lydia said to the chef, her voice tight. "The full Kobe tenderloin, the kilo beluga." The chef, a burly Frenchman named Henri, whistled low. "He is trying to spend God's money tonight. Don't mess this up, Sherry. The last waiter who spilled a drop of sauce on Callaway's table was blacklisted from every restaurant in the city." Lydia grabbed the bottle of Chateau Petrus from the cellar master. The bottle was dusty and heavy. It felt like a weapon. She took a deep breath. She wasn't just a waitress tonight. She was an observer gathering evidence. And Paxton Callaway had just made a mistake. He assumed the help wasn't listening. The meal was a theater of excess. For 2 hours, Lydia performed a ballet of service. She deboned fish tableside without breaking conversation. She topped off water glasses the moment they dipped below the halfway mark. She replaced silverware between every course, ensuring no fingerprint marred the polished silver. Paxton Callaway ate with the voracity of a starving wolf, yet he criticized everything. The caviar was too briny. The Kobe beef, seared to a perfect medium rare, was a fraction overcooked. Trent laughed at every insult Paxton threw, while Veronica ate in silence, looking terrified. Lydia absorbed the abuse. It was part of the job. The "I'm sorry, sir, I'll inform the chef immediately" was a script she had memorized. But as the night wore on, Paxton's aggression turned from the food to her. "You," Paxton snapped, pointing a fork at her. "What is your name?" "Lydia, sir." "Lydia. You stand there like a statue. It's unnerving, hovering. Go stand by the wall." "Apologies, sir." She moved back 3 feet. "Too far," he barked. "Now I have to shout to get my wine poured. Are you simple, girl?" Lydia's jaw tightened. She saw Giles watching from the shadows, his eyes pleading with her to endure it. She stepped forward again. "Is this better, sir?" "Marginally." He turned back to the man with the briefcase. "As I was saying, the tax write-off for the new wing at the Guggenheim is essential. If we don't dump $4 million by the end of the quarter, the trust loses its status as a public stewardship entity." "We have to be careful, Paxton," the lawyer warned. "Public stewardship implies ethical behavior. If the board finds out you're using the foundation's liquidity for personal—" "The board does what I tell them to do." Paxton slammed his hand on the table. The silver jumped. "I am the Calloway Trust." Lydia's ears were burning. He was openly discussing manipulating his charitable foundation to dodge taxes while eating a dinner that cost more than a Honda Civic. Finally, the carnage ended. The plates were cleared. The empty bottle of Petrus stood like a monument to their gluttony. "The check, sir?" Lydia asked. "Bring it." Paxton waved his hand dismissively. Lydia went to the terminal. She printed the slip. The total came to $14,240.50. She placed it inside a leather folio and walked back to the table. "Whenever you are ready, sir." She placed the folio gently near his right hand. Paxton didn't look at it. He continued talking to Veronica about a horse he planned to buy in Kentucky. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The restaurant was emptying out. Only the cleaning crew and the nervous management remained. Finally, Paxton sighed, the sound of a man bored with the world. He opened the folio. He stared at the number. He didn't blink. Then he picked up a pen. Lydia watched, expecting him to sign the receipt or throw down a Centurion card. Instead, Paxton Calloway drew a large, thick line through the total. He wrote a 0 at the bottom. He closed the folio and stood up. "Let's go," he said to his entourage. Lydia stepped forward, blocking the path slightly, a cardinal sin in hospitality, but confusion overrode her training. "Sir? There seems to be a mistake. The bill hasn't been settled." Paxton stopped. He towered over her, smelling of expensive scotch and disdain. "There is no mistake," Paxton said smoothly. The service was abhorrent. The wine was served at room temperature, not cellar temperature. The beef was pedestrian. "I do not pay for mediocrity. Consider the lesson I've just taught you a tip." He tried to push past her. "Sir," Lydia said, her voice rising, "you consumed over $14,000 of product. You drank the entire bottle of Petrus. You cannot just leave." "Watch me," Paxton sneered. Giles, the manager, materialized instantly. He looked like he was about to faint. "Mr. Calloway, sir, is there a problem? Please, allow us to—" "Get out of my way," Paxton said to Giles. "Your staff is incompetent, and your kitchen is a disgrace. I am Paxton Calloway. I don't pay for garbage." "Mr. Calloway," Giles stammered, wringing his hands. "Please the owner. If I comp a $14,000 check, I'll lose my job. We can offer a discount, perhaps take off the wine." "I said 0, Paxton roared. The sound echoed off the wood-paneled walls. "Now move, before I buy this building and turn it into a parking garage." Trent snickered. The lawyer looked at his shoes. Paxton took a step toward the exit. He had won. He always won. He was the unstoppable force, and the restaurant was just an object in his path. "Mr. Calloway," Lydia said. Her voice was different now. It wasn't the voice of a waitress. It was sharper, clearer. It cut through the tension like a scalpel. Paxton paused, his hand on the brass door handle. He turned slowly, looking at her with amusement. "You're still talking?" Lydia didn't back down. She reached into her apron pocket, not for a pen, but for her phone. She didn't look at the screen. She looked directly into Paxton's eyes. "You mentioned earlier that the Calloway Philanthropic Trust is under audit by the SEC for Article 4 compliance," Lydia said. The silence that followed was absolute. The lawyer's head snapped up. Paxton's smile faltered for a millisecond before returning, tighter this time. Eavesdropping is a fireable offence, girl. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was serving, Lydia replied. But I believe you are forgetting Article 4, Section B, Paragraph 3 of your own foundation's bylaws, the Ethical Stewardship and Public Representation Clause. Paxton turned fully around now. The air in the room grew heavy. What do you know about my bylaws? I know, Lydia said, stepping closer, that Section B states, any trustee or chairman utilizing funds or status for personal luxury while publicly representing the foundation must adhere to the highest standards of financial integrity. Refusal to honor lawful debts incurred in public venues constitutes a breach of fiduciary character, triggering an automatic suspension of voting rights on the board. Lydia paused, letting the words hang there. You're wearing the foundation pin on your lapel, Mr. Calloway. Lydia pointed to the small gold crest on his suit. You are here with your foundation's lawyer. You just discussed foundation business. You are publicly representing the trust. She held up the unpaid receipt. If you walk out that door without paying this bill, you aren't just stiffing a waitress, Lydia said, her voice steady and loud. You are violating your own charter. And if I send a notarized affidavit of this event to the SEC auditor you mentioned, what was his name? Agent Miller, along with the security footage of you refusing to pay. She let the threat dangle. Paxton's face went from pale to a deep, violent shade of red. The veins in his neck bulged. You insignificant little, he hissed, stepping toward her. Careful. The lawyer with the briefcase stepped in, putting a hand on Paxton's chest. Paxton! Stop. She's bluffing, Paxton spat. She's a waitress. She doesn't know the charter. I didn't just read it, Lydia lied. Or perhaps she wasn't lying. I know that if your voting rights are suspended, the merger with Omnicorp dies tomorrow morning because you need the Foundation's proxy votes to pass it. The room spun. Paxton looked at his lawyer. The lawyer looked at Lydia, eyes wide with shock and calculation. The lawyer gave a nearly imperceptible nod. She's right. Paxton Calloway, stared at Lydia. For the first time all night, he didn't see a servant. He saw a predator. Who are you? He whispered. I'm the person waiting for you to pay your bill, Lydia said coldly. But Paxton Calloway didn't get where he was by folding easily. A cruel, jagged smile slowly spread across his face. He pulled out his phone. You think you're smart? Paxton laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Giles! Yes, Mr. Calloway, the manager squeaked. Fire her. Lydia froze. Fire her right now, Paxton demanded, pointing at Lydia. Fire her for insubordination, for harassment of a customer, and for attempted extortion. Do it, or I destroy this restaurant. Giles looked at Lydia. He looked at Paxton. He looked at the bill. Lydia, Giles started, his voice shaking. If you fire me, Lydia said, not looking at Giles, keeping her eyes locked on Paxton, I go straight to the New York Times. Billionaire fires waitress to avoid paying for caviar. The optic fits perfectly with the SEC investigation, doesn't it? Paxton didn't blink. Do it, Giles, or I make sure you never work in this city again. The standoff had begun, and the bill still lay on the table, unpaid, a piece of paper weighing more than the building itself. The silence in the Onyx room was heavy, suffocating. It felt less like a restaurant and more like a courtroom just before a verdict. Giles, the manager whose spine seemed to have liquefied under the billionaire's gaze, looked at Lydia. His eyes were wet with panic. He was a good man, usually, but he had a mortgage in Queens and 2 kids in private school. Fear makes cowards of decent men. Lydia, Giles whispered, his voice cracking. I have no choice. You are terminated, effective immediately. Please hand over your apron and leave the floor. Paxton Calloway clapped his hands once. A sharp, violent sound. There, problem solved. Now she is no longer an employee. She has no standing to demand payment. She is simply a civilian harassing a private citizen. Lydia felt a cold numbness wash over her. She unclipped her apron. She folded it neatly, placing it on the service station. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She felt a strange calm, the kind that comes when you have nothing left to lose. She looked at the $14,000 receipt still sitting on the table, ignored. I accept my termination, Lydia said, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. But that doesn't change the law, Mr. Calloway. You consumed goods. You refuse to pay. That is theft of services. Under New York Penal Law 165.15, that is a Class A misdemeanor. Given the amount is over $3,000, we are encroaching on grand larceny territory. You're boring me, Paxton sighed. He pulled out his phone again, dialing a number from memory. He didn't dial 911. He dialed a personal contact. Commissioner? Yes, it's Paxton. I'm at the Onyx. I have a deranged former employee refusing to leave the premises and attempting to extort me. Yes. Send a car. No, send two. I want her made an example of. He hung up and smirked at Lydia. The police are on their way. They work for the city, and in case you haven't noticed, I own a significant portion of this city. You're going to jail tonight, Lydia. And when you get out, you'll never get a job better than scrubbing floors. The lawyer, whose name was Arthur, looked increasingly uncomfortable. He checked his watch. Paxton, the optics of this. If the police file a report, it creates a public record. The audit team creates a keyword search for Calloway and police every morning. This will flag. Let it flag, Paxton snapped. I'm the victim here. I'm being harassed. Actually, a voice called out from the booth behind them. Paxton whipped around. Sitting in the adjacent booth was a young man in a hoodie. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. This was Jax Tarley, a 26-year-old tech prodigy who had just sold his AI startup for 9 figures. He held his phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at Paxton. I've been recording for the last 5 minutes, Jax said, his voice cheerful. I got the part where you admitted you enjoyed the wine but refused to pay, and I definitely got the part where you ordered the manager to fire her for asking you to pay your bill. That's retaliation. Super illegal. Also, kind of a jerk move. Paxton's face turned purple. Put that phone away, or I'll sue you into oblivion. I have good lawyers too, dude, Jax shrugged, and I'm live streaming. You currently have about 15,000 viewers. Twitter is loving the I don't pay for mediocrity line. It's trending. The air left the room. Arthur, the lawyer, stood up abruptly. Paxton, we need to pay the bill. Now. No, Paxton roared, slamming his fist on the table. It's the principle. I will not be strong-armed by a waitress and a kid with a cell phone. He turned his fury back to Lydia. You think this helps you? You think a viral video will save you? I will bury you in litigation so deep you'll need a snorkel to breathe. I will garnish your wages until you are 90. Lydia took a step closer, entering his personal space. You keep forgetting, Paxton, she said, dropping the Mr. Calloway. I know the Foundation rules because I know you. Or rather, I know your history. Paxton narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? 4 years ago, Lydia said, her voice steady. I was a junior paralegal at Holloway & O'Brien. I wasn't just proofreading bylaws. I was assigned to the discovery team for the divorce settlement between you and your second wife, Catherine. Paxton went rigid. The color drained from his face. I went through your expenses, Paxton, Lydia continued, her voice gaining strength. I saw the receipts for the business trips to the Seychelles that were actually just vacations with Veronica here. Veronica gasped and looked down at her lap. I saw the invoices for the consulting fees paid to shell companies that you own, Lydia said, counting on her fingers. And I remember specifically that as part of the settlement to keep Catherine quiet, you amended the Foundation's charter. You added the moral turpitude clause. Article 9. Arthur, the lawyer, let out a low groan. He knew Article 9. Article 9 states, Lydia recited from memory, that if the chairman engages in any public act that brings undue shame, ridicule, or criminal implication upon the trust, the board is legally obligated to freeze his personal assets held within the trust immediately, pending an external investigation. Lydia pointed to Jax's phone. 15,000 people are watching you commit theft of services and abuse power. That creates undue shame. If I call the board members right now, and I have their numbers from the old Rolodex I kept, they will be legally forced to freeze your accounts by morning. You won't be able to buy that horse in Kentucky. You won't be able to pay for this dinner. You'll be locked out of your own fortune. Paxton stared at her. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, the titan of industry looked small. He looked at Jax, who gave a little wave with his phone. He looked at Giles, who was cowering in the corner. He looked at Arthur, who was shaking his head, no, vigorously. The siren of a police car wailed in the distance, getting closer. You called them, Lydia said softly. They're coming for you, Paxton. Not me. Because when they get here, I'm going to show them the receipt, and I'm going to show them the law. And then I'm going to press charges for theft. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers flashed against the tinted windows of the restaurant, casting chaotic shadows across the white tablecloths. 2 uniformed officers entered, hands resting on their belts, looking confused to be storming a fine dining establishment. Who called the commissioner? The older officer asked. He was a sergeant, tired-looking, with a nameplate that read SGT. Miller. I did, Paxton said, straightening his jacket. He tried to regain his composure, summoning the aura of authority he wore like armor. Officer, this woman is trespassing. I want her removed. Sergeant Miller looked at Lydia. She was standing calmly, hands at her sides, still wearing her white button-down and black slacks, though minus the apron. Is this true, ma'am? Have you been asked to leave? I was fired 5 minutes ago, officer, Lydia said clearly. However, I am currently the victim of a crime in progress, and I am waiting for it to be resolved. Miller raised an eyebrow. What crime? Theft of services. Lydia pointed to the table. This gentleman, Mr. Paxton Calloway, ordered and consumed $14,000 worth of food and wine. He has refused to pay. Under New York state law, that is a felony. Miller looked at the table. He saw the empty wine bottle, the remnants of the caviar, the licked clean plates. He looked at the bill Lydia held out. 14 grand? Miller whistled. He looked at Paxton. Sir, did you eat this food? The quality was unacceptable. Paxton scoffed. I am refusing payment based on a failure of contract. The product did not meet the standard. Did you send it back after the first bite? Miller asked. No, Did you drink the wine? It was warm. But did you drink it? Miller pressed. That is irrelevant, Paxton shouted. Do you know who I am? I am Paxton Calloway. I know who you are, sir, Miller said, his voice hardening. But I also know that if you eat the steak, you pay for the steak. Unless there's a health hazard, you can't just clean the plate and say it was bad. That's theft. Arthur, the lawyer, stepped in. Officer, surely this is a civil matter. A misunderstanding. It becomes criminal when he refuses to identify himself or pay, and then calls the police to intimidate the staff, Lydia interjected, And since he called you here to arrest me for demanding payment, he's also filing a false police report." Jax, from the booth, shouted out, "Still streaming! 30,000 viewers now. Azambuso Pay the Bill is trending #1 in New York." Paxton looked at the phone. He looked at the sergeant. He realized the trap had snapped shut. If he was arrested, even detained, the mugshot would be everywhere. The Foundation Board would invoke Article 9. The SEC would descend like vultures. The Omnicorp merger would implode. He had billions in the bank, but he was currently bankrupt of options. Paxton reached into his jacket pocket. His hand shook, just a little. He pulled out a black titanium credit card. "Fine." He spat the word out like poison. "I will pay, but only to end this farce." He threw the card at Lydia. It hit her chest and clattered to the floor. Lydia didn't move to pick it up. She looked at the card on the floor, then back at Paxton. "Pick it up," Paxton commanded. "No," Lydia said. "I'm not your servant anymore. Remember? You fired me." The room went deadly silent. "Giles," Paxton barked at the manager. "Pick it up and run it." Giles scrambled forward, eager to end the nightmare. He scooped up the card and ran to the terminal. The machine whirred. A receipt printed. Giles brought the folio back. "Sign here, please, Mr. Calloway." Paxton scribbled his signature furiously. "There, done. Now, get out of my sight." "Not quite," Lydia said. She walked over to the terminal where Giles was standing. She picked up the merchant copy of the receipt. "You forgot the tip," Lydia said. Paxton laughed, a cruel, incredulous sound. "Tip? You think I'm going to tip you after this? You're delusional. The tip is optional, and my option is 0. "Actually," Lydia said, turning to Arthur, the lawyer, "does the Calloway Foundation Charter have a clause about fair compensation for labor within its ethical investment guidelines? I believe Article 12, Section C mandates that any entity or individual representing the Foundation must ensure living wage standards are met in all transactions." Arthur rubbed his temples. He looked like he wanted to vanish. "Technically, yes. It implies a standard 20% for service industries to avoid accusations of exploitation." "I don't care about Article 12, Paxton screamed. He was unraveling. The cool billionaire was gone. A toddler in a suit remained. "I am not giving her a cent." "Okay," Lydia said. She looked at Sergeant Miller. "Officer, the bill is settled. The theft is resolved. However, since I have been terminated without cause and subjected to public humiliation, I will be leaving." "But Mr. Calloway," she leaned in close, "the video is still online. The board will see it. The SEC will see it. And they will see you throwing a credit card at a woman. You might have paid the bill, but you just lost the war." Lydia turned to Jax. "Send me that video." "Already DM'd you." Jax grinned. Lydia walked toward the door. She passed Giles, who wouldn't meet her eyes. She passed the table where the $14,000 meal lay digested. "Wait," Paxton called out. His voice was different. Panic had set in. He realized that paying the bill didn't stop the video. The damage to his reputation, and the leverage she held, was still active. "How much?" Paxton asked. Lydia stopped. "Excuse me." "To sign an NDA," Paxton said, desperate now. "To delete the video. To never speak of the Foundation bylaws again. How much do you want? 10,000? 20? Lydia turned slowly. She looked at the man who had just tried to ruin her life for sport. She thought about her student loans. She thought about her rent. She thought about the years she spent studying law, only to be crushed by the system men like Paxton built. She smiled. "I don't want your money, Paxton. I want your fear." She pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out onto Fifth Avenue. The cool night air hit her face. She was unemployed, she was broke, but she had never felt richer. However, the story wasn't over. Paxton Calloway was a man who destroyed things that defied him. As Lydia hailed a taxi, she didn't notice the black SUV pulling away from the curb, trailing her. The silent bodyguard, the one who hadn't spoken a word all dinner, was behind the wheel. Paxton wasn't going to let her walk away with his secrets. The yellow taxi rattled over the potholes of 7th Avenue, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon rain. Lydia sat in the back, her adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. She clutched her phone like a lifeline. The screen was cracked from a drop months ago, but now it held the most dangerous file in New York City, the raw footage of Paxton Calloway, the king of Wall Street, throwing a tantrum. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked, eyeing her through the rearview mirror. "Brooklyn," Lydia started, then stopped. She glanced out the back window. 2 cars back, a black Cadillac Escalade, matched their lane changes perfectly. When the taxi sped up, it sped up. When they hit a red light, it lingered just far enough back to be inconspicuous to an amateur. But Lydia wasn't an amateur. She had spent a year working on discovery for high-profile stalkings cases. "Change of plans," Lydia said, her voice tight. "Don't go to Brooklyn. Just drive. Go up the West Side Highway." "It's your money," the driver shrugged. Her phone buzzed. It was a DM from Jax, the streamer. "Jax, the hacks. Yo, weird stuff happening. My stream archive just got corrupted. YouTube took the video down for privacy violation. Like 2 minutes ago, someone is scrubbing the internet." "Do you have a local copy?" Lydia's stomach dropped. Paxton wasn't waiting for morning. He had a team for this, digital fixers who could erase history before the ink was dry. She looked at the video file on her phone. She needed to back it up. Now. "Driver, stop here," she ordered. They were near Chelsea Market. It was late, but there were still people. And more importantly, there was an all-night FedEx office on 15th Street. She threw a 20 at the driver and bailed out before the car fully stopped. She sprinted down the sidewalk, ducking into the FedEx. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed. A sleepy teenager behind the counter didn't look up. Lydia found a computer terminal. She plugged in her phone. Her hands shook as she navigated the file transfer. Copying. 45%. Through the glass storefront, she saw the Escalade pull up to the curb. The passenger door opened. It wasn't the bodyguard. It was a man she didn't recognize, slick, wearing a trench coat, holding an umbrella. But the driver was the silent giant from the restaurant. Lydia looked around. There was no back exit visible. Copying. 80%. The man in the trench coat entered the shop. He didn't look around. He walked straight toward her terminal. He moved with the terrifying confidence of a man who makes problems disappear. "Lydia," he said. It wasn't a question. Lydia yanked her phone out of the cord. "I'm calling the police." "You could," the man said smoothly, stopping 3 feet away. "But the police take 6 minutes to respond in this precinct. I only need 30 seconds. He placed a business card on the desk. It was blank, except for a phone number. "Mr. Calloway is a pragmatic man," the stranger said. "He regrets the theatricality of the evening. He is prepared to offer a settlement." "I'm not interested," Lydia said, backing away until her spine hit the photocopier. "He is offering $200,000, the man continued, his voice monotone. "In cash. Tonight. All you have to do is hand over the phone, give us your cloud passwords, and sign a document stating the video was deep-faked." 200,000, Lydia laughed. A sharp, hysterical sound. "He spent that on wine he didn't drink. He thinks my integrity is that cheap." "It is not about integrity, Lydia. It is about survival. You are a waitress. You have $30,000 in student debt. Your rent is late. We know everything." The man took a step closer. "If you refuse, the offer goes away. And then, other things happen. You will find it hard to rent an apartment, hard to open a bank account. You will become a ghost." Lydia looked at the computer screen behind him. The upload was finished. The file was in her secure cloud Dropbox, shared automatically with a Dead Man Switch email address she had set up years ago for legal files. "You're right," Lydia said. "I am just a waitress." She grabbed a heavy stapler from the desk. "But I also know that soliciting a bribe to conceal a felony is another felony, and this shop has security cameras with audio." She pointed to the black dome on the ceiling. The man's eyes flicked up. For the first time, he hesitated. "If you touch me," Lydia hissed, "Paxton goes down for assault and conspiracy. Get out." The man stared at her. He adjusted his cuffs. "You are making a very expensive mistake." He turned and walked out. Lydia collapsed against the copier, her knees giving way. She watched the Escalade drive off. They weren't leaving her alone. They were just regrouping. They would try something harder next time. She needed an ally. Someone who hated Paxton Calloway as much as she did. She pulled up her contacts and scrolled past Mom and Landlord to a name she hadn't called in 4 years, Arthur Penhaligon. Not the lawyer from the restaurant. His father. The ousted founder of the firm, the man Paxton Calloway had betrayed to take control of the board. She dialed. It rang 4 times. "This had better be good," a gravelly voice answered. "Mr. Penhaligon? It's Lydia, the intern who found the missing trust deeds in 2021. A pause. "Lydia? The sharp one? Why are you calling me at midnight? I have Paxton Calloway on video committing fraud and theft of services, and I can prove he's violating Article 4 of the Foundation Charter. His goons just tried to bribe me." The line went silent. Then a low chuckle started, building into a roar of laughter. "Article 4? You got him on Article 4? The old man sounded delighted. "Where are you, girl?" "Chelsea, but I can't go home." "Get to the St. Regis, room 404. I keep a suite there. My personal security is better than the president's. Bring the phone. We're going to burn him down." The suite at the St. Regis smelled of lavender and old vengeance. Arthur Penhaligon sat in a wheelchair by the window, a blanket over his legs, looking like a retired general plotting one last campaign. He was 80 years old, frail, but his eyes were sharp as diamonds. Lydia sat opposite him, a cup of tea in her hands. She had stopped shaking. "Show me," Arthur commanded. Lydia played the video. Arthur watched it 3 times. When it got to the part where Paxton threw the credit card, Arthur slammed his hand on the armrest. "Arrogant bastard," Arthur muttered. "I told him 10 years ago that his temper would be his undoing. He never listened. He thinks money is a shield. He forgets that money is also a paper trail." Arthur leaned forward. "So, he threatened you?" His fixer did. Offered 200 grand. "Chump change," Arthur scoffed. "This video, combined with the SEC audit. It's a nuclear bomb, Lydia. But we have to detonate it correctly. If you just post it, he spins it. He claims stress. He goes to rehab for exhaustion. And he donates $1 million to a soup kitchen. The news cycle moves on." "So what do we do?" Lydia asked. "We don't go to the press." Arthur smiled, showing too many teeth. "We go to the board." "The board is in his pocket," Lydia argued. "Most of them," Arthur corrected. "But not the swing votes, not the bishops, and certainly not the Omnicorp representatives." Arthur wheeled himself to a desk. "The merger meeting is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Paxton needs the Foundation's proxy votes to approve the deal. Under Article 4, if a formal complaint of moral turpitude is filed by a witness of standing, that's you, and corroborated by evidence, The chairman is temporarily recused from voting until an investigation is cleared. Lydia's eyes widened. If he can't vote, the merger fails, Arthur finished. Omnicorp walks. Callaway Global stock drops 30% by noon. The board panics. They oust him to save the share price. He loses everything, Lydia whispered. He loses his power, Arthur said, which, to a man like Paxton, is worse than death. Arthur picked up the landline. I'm calling my driver. We are going to write a formal affidavit. Then, we are going to crash a board meeting. The next morning, 8:45 a.m. The headquarters of Callaway Global was a glass spire piercing the Manhattan sky. In the boardroom on the 50th floor, the air was air-conditioned to a crisp 68 degrees. Paxton Callaway sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He looked tired. Dark circles rimmed his eyes. He hadn't slept. His team had failed to hack Lydia's cloud account. They couldn't find her. She had vanished. We have full quorum, the Omnicorp CEO, a stern woman named Ms. Zhou, said. Let's proceed. The vote on the merger is the first item. Paxton forced a smile. Excellent. I believe this partnership will redefine the industry. Mr. Callaway, Ms. Zhou said, checking her tablet. There are rumors online. A video? Fake news. Paxton waved a hand dismissively. AI-generated nonsense. My legal team is handling it. It has no bearing on our financials. Good, Ms. Zhou said, though she looked unconvinced. Let's vote. The heavy double doors of the boardroom banged open. Security guards stumbled backward as a wheelchair rolled in, pushed by a young woman in a sharp navy blazer, one she had borrowed from Arthur's assistant. Paxton stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Arthur, what is the meaning of this? You have no business here. I am a shareholder emeritus, Arthur rasped, his voice amplified by the silence of the room. And I have the floor. Paxton pointed a shaking finger at Lydia. And her! Security! Remove that woman! She is a disgruntled waitress. She is a witness, Arthur shouted, surprising everyone with his volume. And she is currently filing a formal motion under Article 4, Section B of the Foundation Charter. A gasp went around the room. The board members knew Article 4. It was the nuclear option. Lydia stepped forward. She looked different today. No apron, no fear. She held a thick folder in her hands. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Lydia spoke clearly. My name is Lydia Vance. Last night, Paxton Callaway committed theft of services, attempted bribery, and filed a false police report while wearing the Foundation crest. I have the video evidence, the sworn affidavit of the responding police sergeant, and the digital footprint of the attempted hack on my personal accounts. She slid the folder down the long table. It stopped perfectly in front of Ms. Zhou. This constitutes a breach of fiduciary character, Lydia continued, locking eyes with Paxton. Under the bylaws drafted by this man, she pointed to Paxton, he is immediately suspended from all voting privileges until an independent inquiry is concluded. Paxton's face was a mask of horror. This is a lie. She's blackmailing me. Did you or did you not refuse to pay a bill at the Onyx Room last night? Ms. Zhou asked, looking up from the file. It was a protest against poor service, Paxton yelled. And did you offer her $200,000 to delete the video? Ms. Zhou pressed. Paxton faltered. He looked at his lawyer, Arthur, the son, who was sitting at the table. The younger Arthur looked at his father, the elder Arthur, and then looked down. He wouldn't save Paxton this time. I move to invoke Article 4. A board member at the end of the table, one of Arthur's old allies, said quietly. Seconded, another voice said. Motion carried, Ms. Zhou said. She closed the folder. Mr. Callaway, your voting rights are suspended effective immediately. As such, you cannot vote your proxy shares on this merger. "Without my shares, the deal dies," Paxton screamed. He looked like he was about to jump across the table. "Then the deal dies," Miss Joe said coldly. She stood up. "Omnicorp is withdrawing its offer. We do not do business with—" She glanced at the report. "Petty thieves." The room erupted into chaos. Phones started ringing. Stock alerts chimed. Paxton Calloway slumped into his chair. He looked at Lydia. There was no anger left in his eyes, only shock. He had been taken down not by a rival CEO or a government agency, but by a waitress who remembered the rules he thought he was above. Lydia looked at him one last time. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just turned the wheelchair around. "Let's go, Arthur," she said. "I have a shift at a new restaurant tonight, and I don't want to be late." The fall of Paxton Calloway didn't happen overnight, but the avalanche started in that boardroom. By the time Lydia pushed Arthur Penhaligon out of the building, the Calloway Global stock had plummeted 18%. By lunch, the video of his tantrum had migrated from Twitter to CNN. The headline, "Billionaire versus Waitress," played on a loop in airport lounges around the world. The board, terrified of the PR nightmare, didn't just suspend him, they forced his resignation. The SEC audit, fueled by Lydia's affidavit and the sudden intense public scrutiny, uncovered years of creative accounting within the foundation. Paxton Calloway wasn't just broke, he was facing indictment. His assets were frozen, his reputation shredded. He retreated to a small estate in Connecticut, abandoned by his entourage, his lawyers, and even Veronica. Lydia didn't ask for a reward, but she got one anyway. Arthur Penhaligon, invigorated by the takedown of his nemesis, hired Lydia on the spot. He didn't hire her as a waitress. He hired her as a paralegal for his private practice, with a full scholarship to finish her law degree at Columbia in the evenings. 3 months later, Lydia walked into a small, family-owned diner in Brooklyn. It wasn't fancy. The menus were laminated, and the coffee was served in thick ceramic mugs. She sat in a booth near the back. Across from her sat a young man in a hoodie, Jax, and next to him was Giles, the former manager of the Onyx Room, who had quit the day after the incident. "You look good, counselor," Jax grinned, sliding a tablet over to her. "You see the news?" Lydia looked at the screen. Calloway Foundation. Restructured. New board announces grants for service industry workers. "They're trying to rebrand," Lydia smiled. "Guilt money." "It spends the same," Giles said, pouring her coffee. He looked happier, lighter. He was running this place now, and while the margins were tighter, the clientele was kinder. "By the way, someone left this for you." Giles handed her a plain white envelope. Lydia opened it. Inside was a check. It wasn't for $200,000. It was for $40.50, the exact amount of the unpaid bill. Attached was a note, handwritten in shaky script, "To the waitress who taught me the cost of everything." PC Lydia stared at the check. Paxton. It was a gesture of, what? Apology? Defiance? Perhaps it was just him trying to balance the ledger one last time. "What are you going to do with it?" Jax asked. Lydia looked around the diner. She saw a young waitress struggling with a heavy tray, looking tired, looking like she had exams to study for and rent to pay. Lydia took a pen and flipped the check over. She endorsed it. "Giles," Lydia said, "start a scholarship fund for the staff here. Call it the Article 4 Fund." She slid the check back. "Tell them it's from a customer who finally learned how to tip." Lydia finished her coffee, stood up, and walked out into the bright New York sunshine. She had a law class to get to, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't just serving the powerful, she was becoming one of them. But she promised herself one thing. She would never, ever forget what it felt like to stand on the other side of the table. The bill was paid. The story was hers. And that is the story of how one waitress used a billionaire's own rules to bring down an empire. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how much money someone has, they are never above the basic laws of respect, and that knowledge is the sharpest weapon you can carry. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, unlike the soup, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a drama-filled story. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if a billionaire refused to pay your bill? Would you have taken the bribe, or would you have fought back like Lydia? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.